You weren't supposed to end up here. In law school, you were the clean-cut overachiever. You are who color-coded case files and believed the phrase, officer of the court, actually meant something sacred. You imagined yourself defending the wrongly accused, maybe arguing constitutional nuances in a polished courtroom, while your parents watched from the gallery with teary pride. Instead, you're sitting in the back of a black SUV that smells like gun oil and expensive cologne, reviewing a racketeering indictment thicker than your old criminal procedure textbook. The men around you don't call themselves criminals. They call themselves businessmen, community investors, problem solvers. The city calls them a gang. And you're their lawyer. It started small. A friend from high school, Miguel, the quiet kid who used to borrow your notes, reappeared one night at a bar. He wasn't quiet anymore. Gold watch, custom suit, eyes that didn't blink enough. He said they needed someone smart, someone discreet, someone who understood the law not as a moral compass, but as a maze with exits only visible to those who built it. You told yourself it was temporary, just paperwork, just making sure search warrants were airtight, just negotiating bail for misunderstandings. The first time you walked into a holding cell to meet your new client, the man everyone in the neighborhood whispers about like a ghost. You expected a monster. Instead, you found a calm middle-aged man, reading a paperback novel. He thanked you for coming. He knew your GPA, knew your moot court awards, knew your father's medical debt. That's when you understood. They hadn't hired you because you were desperate. They hired you because they'd done their homework. From that moment on, your job stopped being about right and wrong. It became about angles. The police raid a warehouse? You challenge the chain of custody. A witness suddenly remembers a license plate. You tear apart their timeline until their certainty crumbles into I think. You don't lie. You never lie. You just rearrange the truth until it fits inside reasonable doubt. And every time you win, every suppressed confession, every dismissed charge, you feel a rush that law school never prepared you for. Not pride, not guilt, power. Because you're not holding a gun or running shipments. You're holding the rule book. And in a city where bullets solve problems fast, you solve them permanently. But being the gang's lawyer isn't just about courtrooms and clever cross-examinations. It's about late-night calls that start with, "We have a situation." It's about arriving at crime scenes before the police do, advising who says what, who says nothing, who suddenly needs to remember being somewhere else. You become fluent in silence. You teach your clients the holy trinity of survival. I want a lawyer. I don't consent to a search. I don't recall. At first, you draw lines. No violence cases. No drugs involving kids. You tell Miguel you have standards. He smiles like you just told a joke. You're not approving the business, he says. You're protecting the rights. That's the mental trick, isn't it? You're not the one pulling triggers. You're just making sure the Constitution applies evenly. And technically, you're right. The system is built on the idea that everyone deserves a defense. But the more you win, the more indispensable you become. They start inviting you to meetings, not because they want legal advice, but because your presence changes the tone. When you sit at the table, it feels legitimate, structured, strategic. You draft shell company agreements that look like something from a Fortune 500 boardroom. You advise on asset protection offshore accounts, charitable donations that scrub reputations clean. You turn chaos into compliance-shaped camouflage. The gang evolves. Less street brawls, more spreadsheets. Less shouting, more signatures. And somewhere along the way, you notice the city changing too. Rival crews get sloppier. They don't have someone like you. Their leaders end up in orange jumpsuits while your clients walk out of court adjusting their cufflinks. Detectives start recognizing you by name. Some glare, some nod with reluctant respect. One of them pulls you aside after a hearing and says, "You know what? They're doing right." You meet his stare and respond with the only shield you have: prove it. Because that's the game. Not morality, not justice, proof. Still, the cracks begin to show. A young kid barely 18 gets arrested on a weapons charge. He looks terrified, keeps calling you sir. You realize he joined because the gang paid for his mom's surgery. You get his case dismissed on a technicality. Weeks later, he's back. This time, it's armed robbery. And you start to see the cycle. Your brilliance isn't just protecting individuals, it's reinforcing an ecosystem. Every legal loophole you exploit becomes a brick in their fortress. And the scariest part, you're proud of the architecture. You've turned their operation into something almost untouchable. You've built a legal exoskeleton around a criminal core. When rival gangs try to retaliate, your clients don't respond with chaos. They respond with lawsuits, restraining orders, zoning complaints. You weaponize bureaucracy. You sue critics for defamation. You bury investigations under procedural motions. You've transformed the gang from a street-level threat into an institution. And institutions are harder to kill. The real turning point comes the night the boss calls you to his house. Not the flashy penthouse, but the quiet suburban one with trimmed hedges and a swing set in the yard. He pours you a drink and thanks you for your loyalty. Then he slides a folder across the table. Inside are photos, surveillance shots, bank statements, your bank statements, transfers you don't remember authorizing, accounts in your name that trace back to shell companies you helped create. He explains it gently, almost kindly. You're not just our lawyer, he says. You're part of the board. That's when you realize the final trap. You thought you were the chess player, but you're a piece on the board, just a more valuable one. If the empire falls, you fall with it. There is no clean exit. The law firm you once dreamed of starting impossible. Any audit would unravel you. Any prosecutor looking for leverage would find your fingerprints everywhere. You leave that house understanding something cold and absolute. You don't defend the gang. You belong to it. The next morning, you stand in court again, suit pressed, voice steady, arguing for the dismissal of a federal conspiracy charge. You cite precedent. You dismantle affidavits. You speak about overreach and civil liberties with convincing passion. And the judge listens. Because on paper, you're impeccable. No record, no scandals. Just a brilliant attorney safeguarding due process. That's your superpower. You exist in the gap between legality and morality. And as long as you operate inside that gap, you're untouchable. But at night, when the city quiets down and the sirens fade into the distance, you replay the path that brought you here. The first handshake, the first lie by omission, the first time you felt that intoxicating surge of power after outmaneuvering the state. You tell yourself you're maintaining balance, that without you, the violence would be worse, the chaos bloodier. Maybe that's true. Maybe you've made monsters more organized, more predictable, or maybe you've simply given them a longer leash. Either way, you've crossed the line so many times, it no longer looks like a line. It looks like home. And tomorrow, when your phone buzzes with another situation, you won't hesitate. You'll grab your briefcase, adjust your tie, and step back into the role you've mastered. Not the gun, not the kingpin, but the quiet force that keeps the empire breathing. Because in this city, power doesn't always wear a mask or carry a weapon. Sometimes it carries a law degree, and that's you.